In this session, let us learn about HTML input attributes. HTML input attributes, the value attribute. This chapter describes the different attributes for the HTML input element. The input value attribute specifies an initial value for an input field. Input fields with initial default values. See the resultant code. See, by writing and executing this code, the result returns this. The value attribute specifies an initial value for an input field. The read-only attribute. The input read-only attribute specifies that an input field is read-only. A read-only input field cannot be modified. However, user can tab to it, highlight it, and copy the text from it. The value of a read-only and input field will be sent when submitting the form. A read-only input field. See, by writing and executing this code, the result returns this, the input read-only attribute. The disable attribute. The input disable attribute specifies that an input field should be disabled. A disabled input field is unusable and unclickable. A value of a disabled input field will not be sent when submitting the form. A disabled input field. See, by writing and executing this code, the disabled input attribute was formed. See, Ponnuri was disabled. It's unclickable. The disabled attribute specifies that an input field should be disabled, unusable and unclickable. The size attribute. The input size attribute specifies the visible width in characters of an input field. The default value of size is 20. Note, the size attribute works with the following input types: text, search, tell, URL, email, and password. Set a width for an input field. See the code and result. We have put the size 40, 50. We have put the size 50 and pin size 4. See here, the size attribute specifies a width in characters of an input field. First name, a pin is equal 4. By writing and executing this code, the input size attribute was created. The max size attribute. The input max size attribute specifies a maximum number of characters allowed in an input field. Note, when a max length is set, the input field will not accept more than the specified number of characters. However, this attribute does not provide any feedback. So, if you want to alert the user, you must write JavaScript code. See, by writing and executing this code, the result returns this. The input max length attribute was created. The min and max attributes. The input min and max attributes specifies the minimum and maximum values for an input field. The min and max attributes work with the following input types: number, range, date, date time, local, month, time, and week. Tip: use the max and min attributes together to create a range of legal values. Set a max date, a min date, and a range of legal values. See here, by writing and executing this code using quantity, minimum and maximum 1. See, by writing and executing this code, the result returns this. The input and min and max attributes field was created. The multiple attributes. The input multiple attribute specifies that the user is allowed to enter more than one value in an input field. The multiple attributes works with the following input types: email and the field. See the example, a file upload field that accepts multiple values. See here code and result. By writing and executing this code, the input multiple attributes, the multiple attribute specifies that the user is allowed to enter more than one value in an input field. To select multiple fields, hold down the Control or Shift key while selecting. See, by writing and executing this code, the input multiple attributes field was created. The pattern attribute. In the input pattern attribute specifies a regular expression that the input field's value is checked against when the form is submitted. The pattern attribute works with the following input types: text, date, search, URL, till, email, and password. Use the global title attribute to describe the pattern to help the user. An input field that can contain only 3 letters, no numbers or special characters. Here the code and the result. By writing and executing this code, the result returns is the input pattern attribute field was created. The placeholder attributes. The input placeholder attribute specifies a short hint that displays the expected value of an input field, a simple value, or a short description of the expected format. The short hint is displayed in the input field before the user enters a value. The placeholder attribute works with the following input types: text, search, URL, tell, email, and password. See the example: an input field with a placeholder text. See the code and the result. By writing and executing this code, the input placeholder attribute field was created. Enter a phone number. The required attribute. The input required attribute specifies that an input field must be filled out before submitting the form. The required attribute works with the following input types: text, search, URL, tell, email, password, date, picker, numbers, checkbox, radius, and file. A required input field. By writing and executing this code, see the code: HTML body, action, body, HTML close. The input required attribute fields was created. The step attribute. The input step attribute specifies the legal number intervals for an input field. Example: if step is equal 3, legal number could be -3, 0, 3, 6, etc. This attribute can be used together with the max and min attributes to create a range of legal values. The step attributes works with the following input types: number, range, date, date time, local, month, time, and week. See the example result: an input field with a specified legal number intervals. See, by writing and executing this code, input restrictions are not foolproof, and JavaScript provides many ways to add legal input. To safely restrict input, it must also be checked by the receiver, the server. By executing this code, the input step attribute field was created. The autofocus attributes. The input autofocus attribute specifies that an input field should automatically get focus when the page loads. Let the first name input field automatically get focus when the page loads. See the code and the result. By writing and executing this code, the input autofocus attribute was created. The height and width attributes. The input height and width attribute specifies the height and width of an input type's image elements. It always specifies both the height and width attributes for images. If height and width are set, the space required for the image is reserved when the page is loaded. Without these attributes, the browser does not know the size of the image and cannot reserve the appropriate space to it. The effect will be that the page layout will change during loading while the image loads. See the example: define an image as the submit button with height and width attributes. See, by writing and executing this code, the input height and width attributes with image was created. The list attribute. The input list attribute refers to a data list element that contains predefined options for an input element. See the example: an input element with the predefined values in a data list. See the result and the code. By writing and executing this code, the input list attribute field was created. The autocomplete attribute. The input autocomplete attribute specifies whether a form or an input field should have autocomplete on or off. Autocomplete allows the browser to predict the value When a user starts to type in a field, the browser should display options to fill in the field based on earlier typed values. The autocomplete attribute works with form on the following input types: text, search, URL, text, email, password, data picker, range and color. An HTML form with autocomplete on and off or on and off for one input field. See example. By writing and executing this code, in some browsers you may need to activate an autocomplete function for this to work. Look under Preferences in Browsers menu. By writing and executing this code, the autocomplete attribute was created. HTML form and input elements. Form defines an HTML form for user input. Input defines an input control. Okay friends, this is the end of HTML part 58, input attributes. In next video let us learn about another topic, input form attributes.
If you like our program, please like, subscribe and press bell icon for our next part video updates. Thank you friends. Meet you in next video. All the best.